Well, I feel like we can go ahead and get started if you'd like. All right, it looks like people are able to enter things into the chat. So first of all, I wanted to say welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being in attendance this afternoon. We are here to have a webinar for MT SHRM, Accelerating the Employee Experience in 2024. I've got Heather and Rochelle with me this afternoon, and we'll get started here in just a second. But first, I wanted to welcome you all and thank you for your time this afternoon. And just a reminder that we're not going to be able to hear you, but if you have any questions or want to put something in the chat, feel free to. We're going to address those as they come in. We do have a few events coming up in the future. We've got our peer-to-peer session coming up in January. That'll be going out in an email later on this week, so stay on the lookout for that and be sure to get signed up for that. And then CE credits for this event will be provided. You'll get an email on the back end as well as a quick survey for you to complete to let us know how this seminar went or how this webinar went this afternoon and give us your feedback. We ask for member feedback specifically to ensure that we're delivering on what we promise, which is, those excellent seminars for our members to help keep them engaged in kind of what's going on in the latest and greatest in HR. And so, and kind of continuing to provide that wonderful program that we do provide. So if you'll give us your feedback on kind of what you like, what you'd like to see more of, we'd love to continue to, hunt that down and bring that back to our members. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I would like for Rochelle to go first and give us an introduction of who she is. So I'll turn it over to you, Rochelle.
Thank you, Linda. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am Rochelle Garlow, and I am actually the incoming programs director for MT SHRM, as well as senior manager for talent management at BAYADA Home Health Care. And I have been in HR for 8 years now, and primarily, I've dabbled in a little bit of everything, primarily focused on and very passionate about talent management. So that's including performance management that we're talking about today. So I'm very excited for this conversation with Heather and Linda. And I studied organizational psychology in CSUCI in California, where I grew up, as well as got the wonderful experience of studying at Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia, which was a fun experience. And I currently live in Nashville, Tennessee, with my little fur baby, Leonard. And if I am not at work, then I am probably hiking with him, spending time outside, or playing tennis. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you all.
Thanks, Rochelle. I'm Heather Thompson. I currently I will get my thoughts together. We're transitioning our roles within the chapter. Hopefully, with your all's vote, I will come in as the president for the MT SHRM chapter in January of 2024. But my paid job is as a chief human resources officer at an organization called Nurture the Next. And I always just have to say it's a wonderful organization, just helping new parents learn to parent in the community. So I have served in a variety of HR roles throughout my career in healthcare and consulting and franchise world, and now in nonprofit. So it's a little bit all over the place, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to kind of dabble in all of those areas. I similarly studied organizational communication for my undergrad and an MBA for my master's. But in my free time, I have 2 boys, so they keep me loads of busy, 10 and 5. So I am usually trying to do something with them or make sure that they're not killing each other.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Rochelle. That's great. I did not introduce myself. I am Linda McDougall. I am the soon-to-be past director of programming here at MT SHRM, and my day job is Gallagher. So I've been in the consulting arena for about 19 years now. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us kicked off for our webinar today. So today we're going to explore strategies around employee performance, goal setting, and then kind of those ongoing trends for learning and development. We've got some questions prepared that we're going to kind of walk through. So I'm going to help moderate today and ask Rochelle and Heather these questions that we've got. But if there is something that we don't get or touch on, would love for you to put that in the chat. Or if there's something that we touch on and you've got, it sparks something else that you'd love to, chime in with, please add that as well. I'm going to do my best to monitor chat and keep that going as well. So with that, we've kind of given a little bit of an introduction. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we're going to start in with those kind of strategies that we look at for effectiveness in performance management. So with that, I'm going to ask, what have you seen as the most effective method of performance management when it comes to accelerating kind of that organizational performance? And either one of you can get started with that.
I'm happy to kick us off, and Rochelle can jump in as she sees. But I think that when it comes to strategy as a whole, most everyone on this call, webinar is probably familiar with this. So it's not like, a new light bulb or information, but I think that one thing that we can kind of always agree on is that when we find an opportunity to motivate employee performance, but also nurture the employee themselves and their performance development and their career pathing and their professional development, when we're able to align those two objectives, then I feel like we're able to provide, kind of clear direction and have a win-win for both motivated and engaged employees and the organization.
Yeah, I completely agree, Heather. And I would jump in too to say that I think one of the most effective ways to manage performance is throughout the year. So sometimes we have annual performance reviews, or maybe that happens biannually in your organization or quarterly. But what's really important is that ongoing feedback. And I like to think of this, the best analogy I've ever heard is really, I'm on a road trip with my leader and I'm driving, but they're sitting in the passenger seat. And as we're driving, we're going from California to New York, and we're really excited about the journey. We have a clear path going forward. On the way, I take a wrong turn. And somehow at the end of the year, or at the end of our trip, we end up in Florida. And I'm confused. Why did I end up in Florida? What happened? What went wrong? And my, leader at that time didn't turn when I made the wrong turn, didn't stop me at that moment right then and say, oh, hey, I think we missed a turn, but we can make a quick, reroute and come back to it. So, I was maybe making adjustments along the way, but on the wrong path. So kind of thinking about that, that's how I like to think about those conversations. We need to be having them consistently across the whole road trip of the year, and making sure that we're providing that valuable feedback, whether it should be, a lot of positive feedback. I think there's lots of research out there that say 5-to-1 or 3-to-1 or do the sandwich method, but making sure that we're really focused on providing constructive feedback and that positive feedback ongoing throughout the year. And so I think that's what really continues to help us move forward as an organization.
Absolutely. I know that Linda has dropped a poll in the chat. We would love to hear from you all about your approach to performance management, what that looks like, whether that's, ongoing, weekly meetings, quarterly, whatever that looks like for your organization. Just to share something that's been effective while we hear from you all is we do take that ongoing approach, Rochelle, exactly like you said. So within our organization, it's social services, and this is looked differently at different places, but for us, this works. So we actually do have weekly one-on-one meetings that are supervisor to supervisee. And then in addition to that, so that we have those ongoing conversations. So we aren't taking a random trip to Florida when we're supposed to head to California. But then kind of as that extra step, we do a quarterly QA together. So the supervisor is sitting down with our staff members. They're using a predetermined quality assurance tool just to kind of catch those things, exactly like you said. So oftentimes in the one-on-one conversations, we're talking about like immediate maybe fires or immediate concerns, or we're talking about immediate successes that are fresh on the mind. But that quarterly check-in allows us to have that overview for the time period so that we don't don't forget something, and we can begin to address those pieces. And exactly like you said, we also, with those quarterly check-ins, that is your year-end performance evaluation. So there aren't any surprises. You were able to address those things right away and be able to move forward. One last little piece while we're kind of taking a look at the chat, and I know that Linda can help share some of those ideas, is we've recently, had kind of gone back and forth, but for our organization, we also don't provide tie compensation to performance evaluations. So I know that sometimes people are like, well, wait a minute, isn't that like what you do? And how do you know what your raise you're getting? But we do provide opportunities for performance-based incentives, but we try not to tie them to that yearly performance evaluation. It helps us eliminate some of that like halo horn effect when it comes to managers trying to be like, I really like this person, they work hard, they really deserve XYZ, to kind of separate the two so that you're providing real time performance feedback that has the pathway for the individuals, like first and foremost, and their professional development up front, without having it tied to that financial impact, especially in those conversations.
All right, well, that's helpful. So in the chat, I put, how does your organization handle performance management, biweekly, quarterly, annual reviews, ongoing? There should be an option for you to change it to, to everyone versus just the hosts and panelists. Some folks are able to do it, but some are saying they're just seeing hosts and panelists. I have changed it to allow all attendees to chat with everyone. So I'm hoping you have the option. It's there on your right when you're responding. Just drop down and click everyone. But some of the responses that we've gotten back to that are biweekly is one-on-ones, quarterly bonuses, annual reviews, annual performance reviews, semi-annual, quarterly check-ins. There's something coming in called a counseling statement when necessary. That one seems interesting to me. Julene, and I'm sorry if I didn't say that right, put that one in. So I'd love to get a better understanding of what that one is, but that one is out there. There's the annual and 2 interim reviews, quarterly, weekly meetings. Let's see here, quarterly check-ins, counseling statements again, mid-year and annual, and then weekly one-on-one opportunities to give feedback and annual performance reviews. So that's what's come in so far, as kind of what other organizations are doing to kind of handle or to look at performance management as an ongoing conversation. So the next thing I'm going to ask is, tell us how within your organization you are taking an agile approach to performance management. So kind of that, what does that look and feel like specifically?
I think, Heather, you started to touch on what you all do. So I'll just share here on my end, but we do annual performance reviews as just a one time and place to collect that information as an organization. However, we also, as many are sharing in the chat, we encourage and promote those ongoing one-on-one conversations and continuous feedback. And so we have campaigns and workshops, and we also utilize an external coaching vendor that helps our leaders just in their own coaching practice to learn how to do those things better. So just making sure that our leaders feel equipped. It can be kind of, I think, one of those things that some people avoid when it comes to giving feedback. So just having that external sounding board, we try to provide that for leaders at no charge so that they have coaching throughout the year to be able to give that feedback. And then we also use the LIFT model. So we call it level set, inquire, future focus, and take action. And so what the focus is here is really, at that beginning is really just trying to understand and ask questions of the employee. So instead of kind of making the conversation, if there's a performance challenge or something that kind of has gone wrong or whatever that might look like, we encourage our leaders to ask questions instead of kind of placing blame or immediately kind of coming to that criticism piece. so that the employee can really take some time to think about and also share maybe where they were coming from or what might have felt right or wrong to them. And then they level set that and keep the conversation future focused. So how do we continue to move forward and take action? Again, encouraging our leaders to ask questions and put the ball in the employee's court. So, saying things like, or maybe some of those questions could be like, how do you think we can, improve this moving forward? Or what do you think could really make you more successful this year? So really asking those kind of questions that it's in the employee's ball. Gosh, I can't talk either, Heather, here today. It's in the employee's court to really take that action and make the plan so they're more committed to it. And Heather touched on this a little bit earlier too, but we focus not just on performance during those conversations, but on development. When we think about goals that we'll talk about a little bit later, or when we're talking about giving feedback, we want the employee to feel invested in whatever the solution is, whatever they want to do with their career, where they're going. And so we really encourage our leaders to have development conversations and ensure that they understand their employees' goals and tie performance back to those goals. So if your goal is to be, for example, the next director, you might be focused on, one of your goals might be creating an executive deck. This is probably not the best example, but an executive deck, right? For the board, or maybe a board deck. And so throughout that process, the leader can then coach, how do you think in a role of a director, you would really create this deck? What would this look like? How could you, and they could really coach and tie it back to what the employee's really passionate about and where they're going, rather than just about the organization's success. And so that really, we've seen that be more successful when we're tying to what an employee really loves to do or what they want to do.
That's really great. Thank you, Rochelle. That was really great. So we'll pivot from there, and so what roles should lead managing performance and then setting those goals?
So I'm just going to repeat the question. I think it was a little broken up on my end. Hopefully, I don't know if it was my internet or not, but 'tis the world of technology. But I believe that you were talking about what roles leaders should play in managing performance evaluations and setting goals, kind of that employee leader relationship. And I saw Deanna, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing names correctly, talk about having employees set goals, and so that they're part of the process, and that they're she does those one-on-one check-ins throughout with the staff member. And I think that that's important, and to have employees help be invested and talk about the goals that they have for themselves. One of the things that happened in multiple organizations I've worked with is when you put all of that on the employee to set goals, you end up with kind of a one-way street of goals. It is either like all professional development. I was looking through some, and I saw an employee goal was to work out 3 times a week. I'm like, well, that's great. And that's great self-care. And I love it. But how does this tie to our organization? So, similar to the analogy that Rochelle used at the beginning, I feel like it has to be a two-way street where both the leader and your staff members are involved. Because it's great to, have like the professional development pieces that are involved that you're setting for yourself, so that you can invest and then have those engagement pieces, and you can really coach someone for those, like the person that wants an executive leadership. You can work with them with that slide deck, or you can work with them to identify different pathways to take there. But there's also times, and many people have talked about in the chat box, how there oftentimes are performance issues. And if you're not being transparent about those, then you aren't working towards the right thing. So we always coach and talk to our supervisors and leaders about how to approach those conversations. And similar to the lift model, or we use a trauma-informed approach, but it's really using a reflective process. So it's asking those reflective questions, not just what do you want to accomplish, but how do you want to accomplish, and getting their input on those pieces, so that it's not, here's my goal, now I'm not going to be invested in it and I'm not going to do anything. So you're asking, well, how do you plan to accomplish that? What are some things that you want to do? But you're also, sharing constructive feedback, which we talk about how my watch was talking to me. Siri thinks I'm talking to it. So we've talked a lot with our supervisors that, and we really want our folks to success, and I know that, or to have success in their roles. And so we start with that question, what does success look like? How do you want to accomplish success? And here are some things that I've noticed, because there has to be that two-way street of, in order for you to reach those goals and have that year in success, then I've noticed that you struggle with time management. What are some things that we can do to tackle that, and put that as a priority for your professional development? Because at the end of the day, time management is important, and we have to have that in that role. So it has to be things that both you and your staff members are contributing to.
Heather, I would agree with that. That's such a great point. And I've noticed, just kind of from a bird's eye view, and working with HR leaders, throughout the community, I've also heard them speak to, not having the agenda for the meeting. They're asking their employees, or their direct reports to show up with the agenda for their, performance conversations. So that way they feel a sense of responsibility for kind of what's being discussed. So just wanted to get your thoughts, feedback on that.
Just to make sure I'm understanding the question correctly, you're saying like for the employee to come with part of the agenda. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If not
Absolutely.
the entire agenda, is what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think that you have to think about what works for your organization. I think that works in a lot of spaces. And I can see how that's really beneficial for a lot of the places. And obviously, again, I've shared, right now I'm in social services. So to have a completely employee-led agenda for those meetings, it's not always, I guess, what we would consider to be supportive. We use the word support a lot. And so, it's kind of finding that balance of, engagement and support to your staff members. But I think that one of the things that, versus a blanket policy that I've seen is starting with that new relationship of talking with each individual about, what do you want out of these meetings? What does that look like? Do you want to come with an agenda? Do you want me to add pieces to those agenda? Do you want it sent beforehand? How can I communicate with you, whether you use a disc profile or a I don't know, many of the other ones, to just have those initial conversations so that you're making sure that it's effective and you're communicating kind of at each individual's level. So I feel like that's been more helpful, but again, that's why we're a panel here. It's just one person's, experience and input, and I've seen it work well both ways.
Yeah, I love getting the employee feedback and kind of what's going to best motivate them in those discussions. So I think that's really helpful. I think that was a good analysis that you just provided there, Heather. I did put another question in the chat, and if you all would just take a minute to kind of give us your feedback on that while we, kind of talk through that question as a panel. But we want to hear from you as well. And the question is, what technology is your organization already utilizing or considering in the future for performance management? And so I guess with that, Rochelle, I'm going to throw that to you. Kind of what new technologies are available to support performance conversations and feedback. So I know that that's kind of, what we kind of lean on heavily for those performance management conversations. So we'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll originally just kind of answer the question that we put into the chat. So we do use Workday. for our annual performance reviews and for feedback. But we are exploring some new technologies that are starting to come out to really enhance performance management overall. So I won't speak to like specific organizations, but I'll just speak to kind of some of the things that we're looking at. So one of those is looking at mobile apps, and really making sure that, we are now constantly on the go. And in our organization, we have leaders that are moving. We're in healthcare, we're in home health. So it means that they are going to people's homes on a consistent basis. They are not at their desk 24/7. And that's a good majority of our population does not sit at a desk like we do, maybe if we're in an HR setting or a corporate setting. So we need to make sure that we're meeting them where they're at. So we're looking at a lot of new technologies that are getting performance management into the fingertips where, we're consistently using our mobile apps, consistently texting our employees. So why not have a app where we can be sharing real-time feedback with our employees in a constructive way? So that's one of the pieces. Another one that we're also looking at as well is using role-playing or coaching softwares, where a manager, just to kind of describe what this looks like, is a manager can actually submit a video of themselves sharing feedback. And this wouldn't be when they're sharing it with the employee. This would be prior to sharing it with the employee. And some versions, this is an AI technology. Sometimes it's a coach. Sometimes it's actually their leader. So it depends on the technology. But they actually get feedback on the feedback they're going to give. So you might, be hesitant to share something or have kind of that challenge of being able to share something that's maybe really difficult to share. And so like leaders will have that support at that time to be able to kind of understand, like, am I sharing this appropriately? Is it coming off the right way? Or there's some other things that I can do to help support this conversation and make it productive? That's one we're really interested in. And then using AI for a few things. So one of those is goal setting. We know AI is here. And there is a ton of really amazing technology out there right now. But there are technologies that you can integrate into the system that you're already using to help look at goal setting, have it suggest more robust goals, or maybe suggest questions to help provoke thought for people to set better goals, and also to identify bias. So like during annual performance reviews, there's new technologies that are AI actually reviews the review that leaders submit prior to it going to the employee, and they get feedback on that and from the AI software. So just something really, really interesting. It helps. I think that's also a learning experience. It's not, while you're not giving it, it can be intimidating to go to your leader and share something and get feedback and have them, identify like, hey, this feels a little biased. But if technology is doing it, maybe it doesn't feel as intimidating, right? And we're learning, maybe gaining some self-awareness, and okay, maybe I am tweaking this a little bit this way, or maybe I didn't think about how I was writing this and it's coming off maybe not the way I meant it to come off. So those are just some new areas or some new technologies we're playing. I'd be curious to know if anyone has used any of these different technologies or AI. Currently, I see I see a few in the chat that people are sharing the systems they use and such, but we'd love to hear from you too, if there's anything that you found interesting or that you've kind of been exploring as well.
I haven't seen much come in. To your point, Rochelle, it's more of the platform that they're using, and it looks like we've got one that created their own forms, but then again, they're considering a platform next year. So I think platforms are still continuing, or HRIS systems are still continuing to be the preferred method for organizations. But to your point, I think AI is definitely in our world and become a huge part of it. So would love to hear if anyone is utilizing that. That's very it's on the radar for everyone.
I think what's great is you can actually, a lot of these, you can a lot of these technologies that are coming out, or the AI software that's coming out, you can actually integrate it into your existing platforms, or HRIS systems, whatever you're using now. And so it makes it a little more seamless, and also just kind of adds that extra layer rather than adding a whole new, I mean, incorporating a whole new system or a whole new process or a whole new like HRIS. That's a lot, and it makes a big impact on the organization. But if you have something existing, these are some things you can explore to just enhance that, what you already have.
Right.
It's always the hard part with new technology is the
Adaptation.
implementation piece. You're like, oh, everybody dreads it just a little.
Yeah. And then the adoption, you just
Yeah.
don't, you have to, what I would say when you're looking at these things, ask the question, right? What is the AI doing for you? But also try to understand, like, where is your organization and where are your employees at this point? Because you have to really understand readiness to incorporate these things. Like some of these, as we explore them, our organization isn't ready for that yet, but we're starting to plan for the future. We're looking at 5 years from now. We're looking at an overall strategy. So it's something to start thinking about and moving towards. But definitely, I would not recommend just incorporating or implementing something brand new into your organization without taking those things into consideration.
Yeah.
It's a great point. I know that some folks are at different places where you're like, there's no system in place. So it's like it's a form, it's a paper, it's a manual process. So like just a system is a big, jump in. And, you were talking about using AI for, the calibration process to check for biases. There's always earlier starting points, right? That you could, just implement a calibration process where someone different is reviewing those to check for biases. So there's all different kinds of ways to use technology to meet your level, wherever that's at, whether that is, we're just getting off of that, a paper form to, no, we're ready. We've been there, we've done that, and we're ready for the AI to, jump in and do its thing. So there's so many cool things that are available.
Like they say, KISS, keep it simple, right? If you can, start off small, one step at a time.
Right.
We saw a big.
Just saw good. We have pressure.
Oh, wonderful.
Yay.
I'd love to know, and that was from from SHRM overall. Is that what I'm reading right now?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, agreed. All right. So, as you just noted, keeping it simple. I think that pivots us to our next, question here, which is setting those SMART goals. And so we all know kind of the definition: SMART, measurable, or specific, measurable, attainable. So all of that. So have been, a part of our vocabulary for kind of the past 40 years, right? So what are some new ways that you've seen that have worked towards developing a SMART and effective goal for, the employee themselves, so that they're bought into it and it's achievable for them, and it's something that they're wanting to do, not just something that year over year, we've done this, we're still doing this, you've got to go in and do it. Reminder, you're on the naughty list, go do this. And then it's just something that, yep, we've checked the box, they've done it. So tell me what you've seen.
So I think that I'm trying to think of where to start, but we kind of use the same information. So obviously we try to make sure that goals are measurable, they're realistic, they're attainable, they're specific. But where we begin to take a little bit of a different approach is there's some research out of the University of Oklahoma from the Hope Research Center that talks about working backwards from goals to basically identify pathways to the goals. So the basic premise in that, am I coming through okay? Okay.
Yeah.
I had some echo for a little bit. So the basic premise basically talks about, setting goals for employees. We can set them all day. But if we don't help our staff members identify the pathways that it takes to reach those goals, then, ultimately they'll lack the willpower to achieve them. And so that's kind of where that hope science comes in. It was first introduced kind of in a different format, but, transferred to the workplace and thinking about, we have this overarching goal that we're trying to reach. Oftentimes, both the organization as a whole just begins to think about the obstacles that are involved, or the staff members begin to think about, the obstacles that are going to come up, like bandwidth or time management, or, competing priorities, or my kid got sick, or like all the different things that can come into the way. And when we get bogged down by those pieces, then we tend to lose sight of that SMART goal you work so hard to set, because we're not focusing on like what are the pathways to get there. So we start with a goal, of course, that we are working towards, and that goal might even change as we talk about the pathways to get there. And it helps us really kind of identify, is it realistic? Is it attainable? Is it actually measurable? All those things that we want. Because as we're trying to identify all the pathways to get there, there's roadblocks or dead ends, or, things that happen. So it's really fun. I can, as we wrap up, and I'm not talking because I won't be able to talk and do that at the same time, I'm happy to like drop a little quick video in the chat box for folks to view something similar. It's not the exact, link, but it's the closest video out there that I saw that would be helpful, and drop that research kind of information in there. But I think that's been really key for our staff members, because we can begin to focus from that coaching perspective of, I really, value and want you to be successful to reach this goal. And it, again, reframes the message on, now how are you going to get there? What are the different pathways we can take? And we try to identify more than one, because one ultimately might have a roadblock. So then we, pivot and begin to look at that from a different perspective. So that's one of the new things that, we're kind of applying to goal setting and to performance evaluations as a whole.
It's really great feedback. Is there anything you'd like to throw in, Rochelle?
No, I think that's, I love, I know Heather shared this with us a little bit earlier when we were speaking, but I really love that approach, and just the flexibility. I think it's so important that you're focused on that. We do use SMART goals, but we also understand we have to provide a lot of training and support for our leaders and our employees to ensure that they understand how to set those, what they look like. So we recently actually just created a what we're calling is like a library of example goals. We use what we call pillars. So we have 5 pillars, and they're essentially as an organization, they're what we're trying to accomplish overall. So there's our people pillar, there's our finance pillar, there's a few different areas, right? And so what we do is we align SMART goals and created examples in different roles of what that actually looks like, that could look like for them, just to kind of give them a place. And we break it down with understanding, like, why is this really important for you to set really specific, measurable goals. And so but everything I think Heather said is incredible. I think what you really have to do, and someone said it earlier in the chat, making sure there's metrics tied to it where we can, making sure that we have a time frame. And so whether you use SMART or something else, I think it's really important to have those overall concepts in it, so that we're moving towards something very specific, and we understand what success looks like. And that has to be in a partnership with employee and leadership. That's all I would say.
Yeah. I know I haven't put it in the chat, but if there is something, that one of you all on the call would love to share with us in regards to kind of something that you've seen or developed, we'd love to hear about it, and can go over that in the next minute as those come in. But with that, I'm going to move to employee engagement. Obviously, a big piece of this performance management is employee engagement, and it's a big part of the overall employee experience, kind of from the start to the end, if you will, of the life cycle of an employee. So, how do performance reviews and ongoing conversations ultimately impact their employee engagement? So I know, as a former total rewards manager, and sitting in that role, it played a huge part in keeping them in the organization to be consistently getting that feedback, or felt like somebody cared about them. We also asked, do you have a best friend at work? And got their responses there. And that was kind of important for us to know kind of what was driving them and kind of keeping them at that organization. So I know that, it was performance feedback was just, or management was just a huge tool that was in that tool that we used. So would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think when done well, performance management can really increase engagement. What I do understand is that when we think about, and we have to be realistic about this, I this was 2 years ago, and I have the information I can share, but there was a few case studies done on different organizations that had a 5-point rating scale and did annual performance reviews. And what they saw was that employees that were rated 5 had a 15% decrease in engagement through February. So that next month, so this happened in January. So just for a month, they said just this very small, slight decrease, and then it went back up and returned to normal. But what they saw from anyone rated a 4 to 1, the engagement dropped drastically, 85%. For it consistently stayed at that level for about 5 months prior to coming back up, where anyone rated 2 to 4 came back up, and anyone rated 1 actually didn't come back up throughout the year. So I think we can dig into this, we can make a lot of assumptions about what this means, but I think what we overall want to understand is it's when we're rating people, it feels personal no matter what. And so we really have to ensure that we're doing this well. We're having good conversations. We're teaching our managers how to provide feedback, and we're doing it throughout the year so that we're not getting to that place once a year that engagement is drastically dropping because people didn't know where they were at or where they stood. And now they're getting new information that doesn't really feel great. So I don't mean to be a bummer in that sense to say it drops employee engagement when we have annual performance reviews, or, we saw this with annual and mid-years too, but we do see that a drop in engagement when people are being rated. I mean, you just think about in school when we were graded, right? Everyone if you got a B, maybe if you were a high achiever and you really wanted that A B still feels bad to you. So if you're not getting that 5, or that A plus, it doesn't feel great. So that's where I just think, doesn't matter what scale you have. It doesn't matter if you're doing annually or biannually. The most important thing here to me is that ongoing piece, and those ongoing conversations, and teaching managers that feedback has to be happening throughout the year, rather than at one point in time. But Heather, what are your thoughts?
I totally agree. I know that we've probably said this a few times about the ongoing in the chat box. It seems like all of these smart people understand that has to be a key piece. And, I guess in addition to it being ongoing conversations, I think that one of the best things that as HR leaders, that we can do is to help equip managers for those conversations to make them ongoing. I bet everyone could raise their hand to say that they have managers on their team that shy away from those difficult conversations as much as possible. And I will say, kind of backing up to that, hope science, and I'm not trying to harp on it, but that has been helpful for us in those conversations, so that we can take that approach because I care about you and I care about your success to the organization. There's some things that we need to talk about, because you're right, people take it personally. It's their work, their values. Our performance evaluations includes values, and that's always difficult for our managers to talk about because people think about organization values being tied to their values. So that's always kind of a touchy topic. So we have to equip our managers to have those conversations. And truthfully, it really is as simple sometimes as helping them have that introductory sentence or conversation that says, like, because I care about you and I care about your success, here are some things that we, that we should work on. What do you need to add? Having that reflective conversations that we talked about earlier, how do you think we can get there? What are some steps that you like, making that question based versus just I'm telling you what you need to do. Sometimes we have to. We end up I always tell people in our environment, we take the trauma-informed approach or lift approach, but sometimes being trauma-informed means that we're being honest. And if we're not ongoingly honest in our conversation, then that's really unfair. I know that I'm continuing to talk, but you shared earlier, Rochelle, about, when done well, it's helpful, for folks, even though it might have that small decrease in immediate engagement. But when it's not done well, it kind of has the adverse. And I bet folks on this webinar can all relate. But recently I worked with a staff member who English is her second language, and then she serves families of multiple languages, both English and Spanish and Arabic, and she uses interpreter services for that. But for a long time in our organization, because there is so much documentation required for social services, healthcare, you name it, in your fields probably have different pieces that are involved too. We required that your documentation for that visit that, for us, because we provide home services too, that it's entered in within 2 business days to make sure it's fresh, to make sure it's accurate, to make sure that it's timely, to make sure that someone else picking up that patient record or family record knows what to do with it. So lots of great reasons, but it was an area that the staff member was struggling. And because we took that approach of care about success, we were able to have that ongoing conversation to say, like, this is where we're at. We're really behind. And that, what can we do? And we use the problem talk pieces. And as part of that, she shared that the process of you have written materials in English, that is her second language. She's translating, she's delivering those materials and curriculum to a new family member and having to translate back all those pieces, sometimes in a totally different language. So had a big impact on the time frame that it took for that documentation. So just those simple conversations, we were able to say, hey, like, organization, this is a rule that we have some flexibility to bend here. So when we're working with families who require an interpreter, there's now it's 3 or 4 days of time for documentation versus like we have to stick to 2. Like, it was, again, a rule for a reason, but something that through those conversations ended up in a better work best practice for all of our employees. That was a success. And, it truly showed that employee that we cared about them and we cared about their success at our organization, which we have seen that engagement increase. That a staff member would volunteer to be in our mission videos. They would volunteer for special projects because they began to see an invested organization into the person, that personal, piece that we talked about before. And it was super helpful.
What I love about what you just said, Heather, it was problem solving. It wasn't a blame anything about, what's wrong with this employee or why aren't they performing or why aren't they getting it on time. It was asking questions to understand what's your barrier here, what's getting in your way of success. And maybe we need to change the definition from our perspective of what success looks like, because maybe it's not meeting you to help support you. And so it's really about coming together to problem solve, not about assigning blame or making it someone's problem overall. But I love that example that you share. It's something so simple, but I'm sure it means so much to that one, like that employee and other employees, just to have that more flexibility and be able to feel like they can be successful.
And I love that it created that advocate for other employees, right? So now they're, jumping on and creating videos to encourage others, and to share about their experience at your organization. So, employee cheerleaders are my favorite. So
Well, we all know that, especially all those who are practice, this job every day, that the opposite is also true. If you have one that is a surprise, that haven't had those ongoing conversations, they're in your office quick, or in a member of your team's office quick, and they're completely surprised, and they thought everything was perfectly fine, and they were driving that bus the right direction. And so it's never fun. And I always tell people, I don't want to have those conversations.
One thing I'll jump in, because it came to my mind as you were speaking, and that I haven't really touched on it, but I think throughout this, when I think about employee engagement and performance management, it all starts with that relationship building. And so that's what we really focus on. One of our core values that is, lived and breathed at BAYADA, is really compassion. When we think about that, it's really about, like, I just met with some of our new HRBPs, and they said, I'm in week 4 and I feel like I'm not doing anything yet. Normally I'm thrown into, basically thrown at the wolves, like told to run, and they continuously keep getting pushback. But no, this is about a time for connection. This is about building relationships. It's something that's so vital in the core of our organization. And that's what helps us then having conversations about what's going well. They know that you care about them. They know that, whatever feedback you're providing is to help them be successful, and you have that rapport. And so I think when it comes to performance in general, if we're encouraging our managers and our leaders to get to know their employees, understand how their employees take feedback, understand how their employees like to get feedback or how they communicate, understand what might be going on, to a certain extent in that employee's life, or, it could just be something so simple as maybe being a little more flexible with their schedule that's going to help them be more successful, whatever that might look like. But it really starts with that relationship building. And if you can encourage that with your leaders, then the performance piece gets way easier. That's just from my personal experience and what we do in our organization.
I 100% agree. We start that employee supervisor relationship almost like with a get to know you questionnaire that kind of helps equip supervisors to have those conversations with new team members, to find out how they like to receive feedback, how they like to be praised, how frequently. And, one of the things that, again, in social services specifically, we hear the word support a lot. And I finally, especially as someone that did not come into social services naturally, I was like, what is support? And so I was like, I don't even know what that means, because it just looks so differently. So just really kind of talking about, what does support look like? Give me an example of when your supervisor was supportive for you. Give me an example when your supervisor was not supportive, so that I understand and we're using the same definitions. But that kind of new hire, almost like questionnaire survey to help kick off that relationship building has been something that's really helpful in starting that relationship.
thank you both. That has been a really great conversation. And we've gotten some really good feedback in the chat, and I think we've shared almost all of it. So I think with that, we are going to come to a close here. I wanted to thank you all for your time this afternoon. Just a final reminder that you'll get an email from MT SHRM with your CE credit sometime next week. And we would love if you would just click the link to take the survey and provide us your feedback, so that way we can utilize it for 2024 to continue to provide programming that you all are interested in, and making sure that, whatever it is, we've got it scheduled for the calendar. And then we look forward to seeing you in the new year at our peer-to-peer session. It was a great networking opportunity the last time we did it, which I believe was in October. It gave everyone an opportunity to not only have a really great conversation, but that may make those connections one-on-one in a live environment. And it just, the conversation flowed that, way over the amount of time that was allotted for the event. So I'm hoping for the same exact thing this time. So we would love to see you come out and join our next in-person event, and that'll be in January. So be on the lookout for that email as well. Again, thank you for your time. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks, Linda.
Bye.